Hello everyone, thanks for joining me. My name's Christopher Donald and I'm going to be doing a demo two-part, and actually so I'll probably separate it into two different videos so you can watch them independently. But part one is basically going to be throwing a plate and kind of doing it in the what I would consider the hard way versus the easy way. And this is 3 pounds of clay. I don't have a bat. Normally, you're going to want to throw plates on bats. This wheel, I almost never use it for anything like that. I've got a separate wheel that has bat pins in it. A bat is a separate platform that you fasten onto the wheel head so that after you throw on top of it, you can remove that surface and then put another one on so you can keep working. So the piece doesn't have to dry on the wheel head. When I occasionally make those with this wheel, I just let them dry on the wheel head and cut them off later. So it doesn't really bother me. But a bat's going to be kind of essential for throwing plates. We're just going to pretend the wheel head is my bat. Anyhow, so go ahead and get started here. When I started it, I made sure that this was just fastened down really well onto the wheel head. Make sure it's centered before you even start throwing. And then I'm going to get this outer edge stuck down, just with my sponge and finger. And then I want to make sure that this edge is really well stuck. Normally on a smaller piece of clay, I would just use both my hands in kind of a cupping motion, like you're cupping water to drink it. But this is a bigger lump, so in order to get this to be stuck down well, I pull my arm into my stomach and I kind of use it more as a piston. So it's really my right hand doing most of the work, and my left is just kind of supporting it. Once this is stuck down, I can push the clay so that it will go down. Now, to push it down, I'm actually pushing into the edge of the clay at an angle. And centrifugal force is going to help force that down. I should let that do the work for me. I'm not actually coming down on the top of it. I'm coming at it more from a 45-degree angle. And when you're throwing plates, you want the lump that you start with to be the final diameter of what you want the bottom, at least the foot of that plate to be. So I don't want to take and pull this clay out. I want to make the lump the correct diameter. And I'll do that by pushing in the center of the lump and then pushing outward. So I want this mushroom cap to be the size that I want the bottom of my plate. It's important because if I instead go in and then pull the clay out, it will fold over itself. And I don't want that fold underneath there because even with compression, that fold will often cause a crack later on. So if I open it up like this or spread it out like this so it's a big flat mushroom cap, now I can push my thumb down into the center. I'm going to leave it a little bit thicker so that I have room to trim a foot into it. That's kind of the classic way of doing it. And then now I'm going to just open this up. I like using a sponge for this because that way I can kind of keep lubricating the clay as I open. If you get partway into it and you run out of water, just get more water and then finish opening it up. So you can see, even with a really wide lump, by starting in the center, I can open up a big ring. Then I'll use my sponge and my fingers to really compress the heck out of this clay for the floor. Plates are notorious for getting S-cracks. S-cracks are compression cracks. They're caused by not compressing this clay enough at this stage. So that's another reason to leave the floor a little bit on the thick side. That way I have room to compress without it ending up being too thin on the bottom. So first I compress with my sponge and my fingers. Then I'm going to use a rubber rib, and I'm going to compress with the rubber rib. Why don't I use a wooden rib for this? It's just a little bit wide for my wooden rib, and I actually like the rubber rib because this is a stiff rubber rib, and it's a little bit rounded on the corners. They don't tend to want to dig in the same way as my wooden rib would dig in. Now, you could use a wooden rib with that same kidney shape. I just tend to like that stiff rubber rib for that final compression myself. The main thing is that you're compressing that. Now that this is so much bigger, it's traveling quite a bit faster on this rim than it would be if I was doing like a small cylinder for, say, like a mug or something. And I'm probably going to need to slow the wheel down a bit. When you're doing plates in large bowls, you have to be aware of that rim speed and making sure that it's not going too fast and getting out of control. Now that I've got this outer diameter ring, I'm going to compress this coil, compress and center this coil. This is the second point where you can center your clay. You can center your clay as a lump, and you can center it as a coil after you've opened up the floor. On large pieces of clay, centering the coil is going to be much easier to do and more efficient than trying to get the lump perfectly centered before you open it up. Mine was centered when I opened it up, and it was pretty centered after I opened it, but that's going to be difficult for a lot of people to get. So before I finish up the rim of this plate, I'm going to come underneath here and I'm going to trim a little bit of this excess off. That's the slop clay that, is from leftover from me opening it. It's not really going to be quality there, and frankly, it's going to get trimmed off later anyhow. I might as well trim it off now while it's easy to take off, and I can just re-wedge it and make something else out of it, rather than leaving it for later when it's going to take more effort to trim it. And then I just need to throw a very, very small wall. Nice thing about plates is that it's not a lot of throwing, and you can keep it thick enough that if you want to do like a flattened kind of a plate rim, it's pretty easy to do that. Again, I might turn down the speed a bit. It keeps getting wider and wider. And if I'm going to bring this down, I'm going to kind of guide it down with my finger on the underside, on the outside. And then I'm just going to basically clean my hands off, more or less done throwing at this point. And then anything that I have left to do is just me shaping with ribs. So I will use my metal rib, kind of start pushing this down, supporting it on the underside. I can use my metal rib on the inside here, sort of guide this outward. And one nice thing about making your own pieces in ceramics is you can start making work which reflects how you actually live and how you actually like to eat and serve food. One thing that we do in our house is that, well, we eat on our laps a lot. So I like to make plates that have deep rims so that they're almost like a really shallow bowl, because that's much easier if you're going to eat on your lap. So it reflects the kind of eating, the kind of thing that I actually do in my life. And it might be hard for me to find that perfect plate commercially that does exactly what I want it to. I can make my own. There we go. Nice broad rim. Use my fingertip, clean dry finger to kind of give that its final little tweak. And there we go. So this is all done. I could also do beading or something if I wanted to at this stage, but this is essentially finished. All right, so this was the hard way. Downside of throwing like this. I have to center the entire lump. So 3 pounds of clay to do a fairly small plate. It can be more like 4 or even 5 pounds of clay to do a large dinner plate. This would be more of like a smaller lunch plate. Remember, you've got shrinkage. So it's like 12% shrinkage from wet to finely fired. You start making things that are 12 inches in diameter, and that kind of shrinkage becomes visible. So I have to center the whole lump, and maybe I haven't been throwing for very long, and it's difficult for me to center more than 1.5 pounds of clay. So that could be a bit of an ask for me to make something this large by centering all that. The easy technique that I'll have a separate video for Makes it so that I don't actually have to center any of that. And the only thing that I need to do is center the coil before throwing the rim. So please join me when I have the next video to see that. As far as taking this off of the bat or off of the wheel head, all I would need to do is I want to put a tiny little notch in the bottom. I'll turn this back on. I've already cleaned that up pretty good, but this little notch is just to make sure, because it's such a wide bottom, I want my wire to just not want to ride up. And it's also helpful to have a wire which has been thinned, or a spiral wire. A round wire or a monofilament, like fishing line, has a tendency to want to drift upwards when you go to make your cut. So one way of avoiding that is that you can just take your wire apart, split it in half, and kind of unwind it, and then you'll have a spiral wire which cuts easier than a round wire. And I'm going to go ahead and remove my pan here so that you can see what I'll do as far as cutting this off. All right, I took some digging. I actually found one of my spiral wires. Poor guy's a little bit kinked. Usually if they're kinked like this, you should straighten them out a little bit. If they've gotten bent by closing the lid of your tackle box on them or whatever other horrible thing I've done to it, I want to hold this pretty straight, and I'm going to make sure that I've got it running right into that little groove, and I'm going to kind of pull down and towards myself. So by pulling downward, I should ensure that the wire is cutting flat in the center. There we go. If this was on a bat, I'd put the bat on a table, and I'd have it so that the edge of the bat kind of hit my hip, and then when I pull the wire through, I'm kind of supporting that on my hip, and then I'll pull the wire just like right into my pant leg, and that gives you a nice clean cut. So you can see this guy's sliced off here real nice. I would not really recommend trying to move a plate in this condition. This clay is pretty stiff, and I actually can move this plate. But the reason why you don't tend to want to do that is that you're very likely gonna warp your plate when you go to pick it up. If you have really big pot lifters, you could probably move this guy. I'm gonna do it just because it's a demo. So, whoop, there you go. He's been moved off, and as soon as I did that, I distorted it. So there we go. Exactly what I thought was going to happen happened to it. Kind of depends on if that's a problem for you. I know lots of people that do fairly that do plates that are really organic. So let's say I was going to do something more like that. Well, heck, I can just pick it right up off of the rim, up with the rim, and not even worry about it, because I'm going to come in and give this a completely different type of a rim. And I need to do it when it's soft, because if I do it now, it will look correct. There we go. There we go. So that just made up for what I did to it. There's just certain things that you can get away with when something is soft that you can't when it's stiffer. So if you wanted to do something like that at this stage, this is when you'd want to do it, not when it's getting to be leather hard. But I just use that as an excuse for wrecking my plate, lifting it up off of the wheel head. All right, I'll see you back for the second video, which will be throwing a plate the easy way. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you soon. Bye.